Hello and welcome to another Connecting Consciousness update or talk, and it's the 11th today, Sunday, so we hope we might be able to get this out tonight if Andy's got availability. Otherwise it might have to go out on Monday. So trying to catch up on everything that's happened. I really want to talk straight into the situation in America, and I really want to talk about what we're looking at and what the future might be. Becky has said that there are a couple of questions along this theme. I don't know what those questions are, but if I address most of the topic on that, then I won't take those questions, but I understand that they're quite free ranging, so I probably can put something else in that I haven't mentioned. Alright, so I've always tried to be upbeat and I've always tried to be positive because I believe ultimately the future is good, but I think we are going through a very difficult time at the moment, and I wanted to relay that to you. Those of you who listen to my show and anyone else who is in the alternative truth movement, you know very well that the cabal or the elite, whatever you want to call them, not only are controlling in the banks and the finance industry, but they are controlling in just about every other industry. If we accept the fact that these people have, in one shape or another, been in power since before the times of the Sumerian period on our earth, then we should not be surprised that nearly every organization or any business of any consequence has that type of effect feeding through them. And I did talk, and I will remind the audience that a local bookshop had some books in their window and they were doing special offers, and one book was all about Michelle Obama, one book was all about ex-President Obama, and these are all in the front window, and the Obama book comes out I think on the 15th of November, and already there's a 25% off, not because nobody wants to buy the Obama book, but because the elite actually want to push this book and they can almost give it away. And then in the bottom there was a book about Trump, but it was written by a member of his family who's attacking him. So this is no coincidence that the publishing houses, the organizers, on 3 weeks run up to the election period, here's a mainstream bookseller with these 3 books in the very front window. Right across society, this theme, this culture is now expressing itself. Look how, for instance, Facebook is now banning anything to do with the Q movement. So they're removing anything, not just the obvious Q uploads, but anything referencing to it. So the question that really must be asked, and was asked to Donald Trump, but he didn't unfortunately address it because there were lots of other things going on, but by a newscaster, but I'll address it to us today, is that if, as is truth, nearly all mainstream media is controlled by the organizations that desperately want Trump out, and in the mainstream media perhaps we can only think of Fox News as the only more pro-Trump side, and every other mainstream media is absolutely vehemently against him. If we accept that all of the social media platforms are against him, how does he get the message out? Is it actually even possible? There have been some tweets from the president saying that he was signing an executive order to remove the black marks through documents, we call it redaction, to remove the redaction marks from documents relating to Hillary Clinton and relating to the FBI and the CIA. And what happened was that these were then fed out through trusted websites that the organization can use, but as fast as they were posting them, those social media organizations were taking them down. So are we reaching a position where that side of the voice is never going to be heard? And if there are millions and millions of people who don't want to see the truth, they believe in the world they've been given, why then would they think that President Trump was anything but an evil person? We're looking at the official polling figures. The official polling figures are fairly clear that Joe Biden, well, we really should say Kamala Harris, will become the next president of the United States. So every official polling figure that I have been able to look at is calling a Democrat win for Kamala Harris as to be the next US president. Even some of the Republican Party are now spooked by these figures. Polling after polling after polling tend to be showing that Kamala Harris is going to be the next president and that Trump will not get his second office. I'll tell you what the Democrats believe. The Democrats believe that they will continue to hold the House of Representatives, and they will increase their majority there. The Senate, the Democrats believe that either the Republicans will win by 1 or the Democrats will win by 2. Absolute knife edge. So the Democrats are planning that they could lose, but they could reduce the Republicans' hold, but the Republicans could hold the Senate by 1 seat. Or they might just swing it and hold it themselves by 1 or 2. So that's where they're looking on that. As far as the president is concerned, the Democrats are convinced that President Trump will not be elected now. The Democrats are absolutely clear that it's 75% likely they will win, 25% likely they will lose. So the Democrats now are already planning their victory. So we need to look at that and perhaps ask ourselves, if that is the case and President Trump has failed to get his message across to the voters of the United States, because nearly all of the mainstream media have worked against him, because all of social media has worked against him, and ultimately then he failed to turn that around one way or another. What is it then that could possibly win him the election on November the 3rd? And there are only 2 real possibilities here. And I'm now going to draw on Great Britain as an example. Those of you who are old enough to remember Margaret Thatcher, the British Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher came to power in the general election of 1979. That was reasonably close. She won with a good majority, but it was still not a landslide. She won again in 1983 with a massive landslide, and then she won again in 87. So she won 3 general elections. But if you'd stopped people on the street and asked them who they would vote for, they would say they were not voting for Margaret Thatcher. Publicly, people were basically distancing themselves from her. But when they went into the polling station, they voted for her. They voted for her because she was a strong woman. She was very pro-British. She was very strong on the military. She was very strong on the police force. She was very anti the left, the socialists. And the alternative was a very radical, in this country at that time, a very radical left-wing opposition under a guy called Michael Foot at that time in 1983. And so the choice was very stark between a very strong leader and somebody who perhaps the place would just collapse into civil war and mayhem. So everyone, when they were asked on the streets to tell them what they were voting, they would say, I'm not voting for Margaret Thatcher. But when the general election came, those same people went and voted for her, but came out of the polling station and pretended they hadn't voted for her. So that's one way that President Trump could win. The second way he could win is if all of the polling figures are lies. That's a tall order. It's not impossible. It's a tall order because every polling organization or group would literally be in the pockets of the other side and are skewing or faking the results. These are the only 2 ways that he can win. Either the public are telling the pollsters one thing and they'll vote for another, or basically they're not being reported truthfully. Because if the poll figures are accurate, Kamala Harris will be the next president of the United States. Here's the next point. Since 9/11, what people call the white hats, the good guys right across the United States have worked very hard to try to rid their country of this evil, satanic grouping or force, and have had considerable success in a number of key areas. Now, how are they going to respond if Hillary Clinton Mark II, that's my label for Kamala Harris, Hillary Clinton Mark II is going to be announced as the winner, in particular the United States military? If you accept what I've said, that it was the United States military that basically, in conversation with Donald Trump, brought him to this position, which he obviously had to accept and go for. How do they feel? Because the US military wanted to play the game, go to America, offer a candidate that was a maverick, not really part of any political system, but was clearly separate from the established Washington, D.C. group. And it worked. But now on the second playing, if that's not going to work, then they're back to square one. They're back to facing somebody who, and let's face it, what I'm telling you is just public knowledge, wants to put $4 trillion on the US taxes, wants to make a number of cities free cities, which are free for illegal immigrants to work and to have access to healthcare and housing, and can then work with the economy. Scale back the police, scale back the army. If that's what people want, then that's what they'll vote for. But the question is, would the people who have worked so hard to try to overturn that ideology, the President Trump supporters, are they going to take this lying down? Because on one hand, they have to represent the people's views, if that's what the American people want. But if that's walking the United States into disaster, are they really going to sit back and go right back to square one where they were before? So this is the problem for the future. This is the problem for that key period of time between November the 3rd and into January, where it may be that some diehards do not accept what is put forward. I'm not talking about where there's corruption. I'm not talking about where it can be proved that the voting has been fixed and cheated. That's a different matter. I'm talking about if it's a free and fair election and the majority of the United States votes for Kamala Harris, what do the good guys do? Because if it is shown that the American people, through a democratic process, I'm using the word democracy, of course, but in the terms of how the elections work, if they are free and fair elections, surely those people have to stand back and say, this is what the American people want. Or do they say the American people have been lied to because of the mass media, because of the social media, and they are witness to so much underhand evil that this good element decides that the United States Constitution is more important than anything else. So what I'm saying is that the Democrats are convinced that they are going to win. And for me, as an outsider looking in, what's bizarre is that it isn't Joe Biden or Kamala Harris who've won the election, if that's what happens. It's the media who won it for them. How wonderful for a politician, and remember I'm an ex-politician, to just hold a few little meetings, sit in your front room, speak on Zoom or Skype, go to a social distance meeting of 10 people, what an easy life, how wonderful, knowing full well that 99% of the established media are doing your work for you, selling your vision and your idea. So that's what's happening. If those polls are accurate, if they're accurate, and if the people who go to the polling stations vote as they say they will vote, then it is the media that has won the election. No politician, the media, combination of the established media and social media. That's the greatest warning, because what that tells all of us, even the stupid people, is that the vast majority of humanity can be manipulated and controlled by a combination of social media and established media. And that's incredibly serious for the consciousness of the planet. If that is how it's going to be, and as I've said, there are the two possibilities that could allow President Trump to win, and those are the ones I've given, based on hard fact what happened in United Kingdom. So a very serious time. Either side is not going to take this lying down. We know that. The question is what that transition period is going to be like. So I did want to talk about that. I think that's the most serious thing on the table. And I'll go straight to the questions, because hopefully there'll be questions that pull up on other topics of great interest. Thank you. Over to you, Becky.
Okay, so the first question is from Dean in the UK, who asks, what do you see as the probability that the US descends into civil war over the political tug-of-war? And if it does, how long do you think it will be before the Red Square Alliance, in brackets China, Russia, North Korea and Iran, launch their attack on them? Many thanks for your work.
And just in case you're thinking that the white cat's lost a lot of weight and has shrunk, that is, of course, the small new little kitten. It is an interesting question, and it's one that is doing the rounds at sort of semi-diplomatic levels. I don't actually foresee it. I think what's much more likely is a hardening up of the economic barriers. So a physical all-out war is highly unlikely. But what is much more likely is the moving together of certain countries or certain leaderships to form not impenetrable barriers, but in terms of trade, in terms of political expression. Look at the war between Azerbaijan and Armenia at the moment, and the point there is that different countries support different groups. So Russia is actually more pro-Armenia and Turkey the other side. So rather than an all-out war, which nobody wins in the end, frankly, except the elite, I think what I would just take out the word war and look at organizations or countries that have sat on the fence will be forced to choose one side or the other. So I don't envisage a war.
Okay, thank you. James from England says, Dear Simon and Rebecca, in the light of the notion that all is one, that another is another self, that another is an other self.
I got it.
And that by serving another we serve ourselves. When the time comes and one's thoughts and deeds are weighed and measured, what is the spiritual difference between an altruistic life lived for others' sake, and the service given for betterment of the self and intellectual recognition as the morally right choice? There might be more. Hold on a sec.
Well, let me just take that one.
And it just says, God bless you both, take care.
Well, that's very
James.
kind. It's sort of like a Zen question. When I say it's a trick question, I don't mean, James is trying to trick us. It's a very important question, and one that I'll answer straight away, because here in the physical world, we are not just energy. We're a mixture of physicality and energy, and we have to physically interact. So if you just lead a life where you physically look after yourself, that is service to self, and doesn't become service to building your own higher self, because that's the energy part of you. So here on this world, what we have to do is we have to do service to others, which is a physical service to others, if we intend at the later date of our development to have that translated from physicality into energy. So as much as we might think that looking after ourselves and developing ourselves puts us in good stead to reap the benefits later on, the reality is, and whether you believe in Jesus or not, that the teachings were very much about, in the physical world, helping other people. It doesn't just mean money, it can be in so many other ways. So the question is accurate, but what's missing out of that equation, if I can use that word, is the balance between a physical world and an energy world. And that is my answer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So this has raised the thoughts in me, because when one thinks of service to self, sometimes we think of someone as being evil or perpetrating deeds that are bad for others or harmful or hurtful. That is a sort of a stronger version of service to self, where one is willfully evil. Some people can be service to self where they're just more self-centered, but not purposefully trying to be evil and hurtful of others.
But that shows a lack of understanding. For instance, the person drives a motor car and they want to go to the store, so they park in a way that is disrespectful for a wheelchair user or a mother with a trolley or something who would have to cross at a certain point, and that car is parked in a way that it's very inconvenient. That's service to self. Service to others is when a person drives and thinks, well, I want to be as close to the store as I can, but I won't park there because that's not convenient for other people. I will be inconveniencing other people, so I'll go 30 yards down the road. That's probably a long way, but 10 yards down the road and repark. I've got further to walk, but I can be confident that I'm not impacting other people. You see, that's a much more softer aspect, but it's still the same thing. It's when does a person think of themselves, and when do they think about other people? And unfortunately, with the majority of the human race, other people don't come into it. Other people only come into it when they're in your face, and you have to interact with them. When you're on your own, most people don't think about other people. They just live within themselves, and they think about themselves because the society. We talked about Margaret Thatcher because very, very well publicised, as Margaret Thatcher said, and I quote, "There is no such thing as society." Can you imagine a leader of the Western world saying what she said? There is no such thing as society. And what she did very successfully from a political point of view was to build service to self, because when you were selfish, you didn't concern yourself with other people. You only wanted what was good for you. And if politically you can aim policies that target a certain economic group or a certain geographical group, then they'll respond to that. And we never really got over that. That was the 1980s, and we're still there now in the 2000s, because so many people think about inconveniencing others so that they are not inconvenienced. So
okay,
I hope that's a more of a picture that I've been able to paint for my answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Alwina from Belgium says, "Dear Simon and Becky, what does it mean when you touch a person and get this vision of a black hole, that they carry a black hole inside of them where their soul should be? I don't know if black hole is the best description, but I saw a black tornado in that person that sucked everything in. My experience with that person was far from pleasant, so I'm thinking it's not a good thing. But I'd like to know what it is. Are these clones or humans possessed by something? Thank you."
Thank you for the question. It's the first time, to my knowledge, in 10 years we've had a question like that. It's not a clone. What you're describing is a person who is taken over or possessed by nothing short of a very powerful demonic entity. Interestingly, you have not referred to a blackness or a stillness, you've referred to a tornado turning. I wonder if it was spinning clockwise or counterclockwise that actually has an effect and would have passed a bit more information to me, but I wouldn't expect you to have even thought about that. It's a demonic entity that has lodged within inside a person who might have been really good, we don't know, but certainly that's exactly what you've come across there. Quite a rare case, very few people like that. This is a raging, angry, very powerful entity that cannot exist in our world except through the physical body of another person, and they choose to interact in this realm through an individual. That's a really helpful question because it shares and passes information to the audience. Thank you.
Okay, the next question is from Sydney, who says, "Dear Simon and Becky, I was asked a question yesterday and it was this. Sydney, has humanity lost control of the world situation because the controllers have not lost their grip on things? Does this mean that the new Earth is upon us and people will move, leaving the rest of the old Earth in the mess that was left behind by the controllers?" I must say I found the question unsettling to say the least. I tried to provide a positive reply, but I don't know who I was trying to convince more, me or him. A big thank you to both of you and everyone in CC family. Love and light to everyone, Sydney.
Well, that's a good question. Unfortunately, no. We need a critical mass. We got a critical mass to move through to the next stage. That was on the 31st. But if the majority of the human race embrace the status quo, then that majority will ultimately choose a more dense reality for themselves. But their intransigence to make a choice and to move forward literally does put a brake or an anchor, slows down the much smaller group who are willing and ready to make that movement across. So don't see the image as the world goes up in flames, but a small group of people escape. This time of choosing, which is all around us now, is part of that process, and the transference to another realm will only occur excuse me, when that has been dealt with. In other words, whilst this is at this level, the choice is still being made. The choice is being decided. So it would be wrong to think that we've all got a get out of jail ticket and we can just sit and let the world go whatever and it doesn't matter because we're going to go free. That's not the case. That's very much the case of the fake alien invasion, when the world looks like it's about to go up in flames, and then these supposed spaceships arrive and all the good and the brave all go onto the spaceships and go off to the new Earth. The reality is that those people will never be seen of again, and they won't reach the destiny that they think they're going to. So no, we have to go through this pain period where we cannot abdicate ourselves. I could just sit here and say, look at all this going on, I don't care, I'm all right, I'm going to the fifth dimension, let everyone blow each other up and all the rest of it. Now that would be service to self. So what we have to do is we have to engage, we have to be interested, we have to care, and we have to do whatever it is, no matter how small or little, to try to do our best, because unless we do that, we actually won't get where we think we're going to get. So no, the answer is the time is not yet happening. There are a few people who are making that transference, but if you look on it as a percentage, it's probably 0.001, something like that. It's minuscule. And so really no, this is a time of choosing, it's a time of test, and that we cannot disengage from it in the sense that we can say, we're going to lock ourselves away and you just get on and do it. That isn't the way to deal with this. That's not why we all came here. Those of you who listen to this show, you listen to other people, you came here for a reason. You didn't come here for the vacation, the holiday. You came here to do something, whatever that was, and by absenting ourselves or taking ourselves away from the debate, we're not actually fulfilling the reason we came here. So it's a very good question, but the answer is clear. No, we've got to get back in there and fight the good fight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. John asks, Dear Simon, I would like to ask for your opinion or interpretation of an experience that I had when I was about 21 in around 1986. I was visiting a friend in a short-term let house in Belgium. I stayed overnight there, and there was a crucifix with Jesus' figure hanging on the wall. I had always been interested in religion and spirituality, but this was before the internet and had only read books. I got baptised voluntarily at 15 as a kind of insurance in case the Christians were right, but I only went to church a couple of times because I found the people to be rather dull. When I first saw the figure, I decided to try out what would happen if I mentally called out to Jesus. I was lying on the bed. After doing this for some moments, I started to feel waves of blissful energy coursing through my body. I have a feeling that they went from below up, but I'm not sure as it's so long ago. They got very strong, and at some point I felt something change. I had closed my eyes, and at a certain moment when I felt this change, I opened my eyes. I felt I was in a trance. It wasn't like being awake, but I wasn't asleep. It was another state. Anyway, when I opened my eyes, I literally saw a figure of Jesus suspended in the air, just off the foot of my bed, and the whole length of his body was visible from head to toe, floating above the foot of the bed. It was of light, very bright. He was wearing a long white robe and looked like the classic images with a beard. He was also enhaloed. The space around him was all lit up. This doesn't make sense in normal physical terms because I was still laying down, but I remember he held out a hand to me, his left I think, and I took it and held it. Unfortunately, at that moment, rather than start a dialogue, I started to have thoughts like, if Jesus is real, then hell exists. Being a rather fearful soul, I became overcome by fear and couldn't really handle the experience. I closed my eyes and wished for him to go away. After a while, the blissful energy that had been filling my body throughout the experience began to subside until it was gone altogether. I opened my eyes and he was gone. I did start to call him again, and the energy began to build again, but I was still too afraid. I haven't told many people about this. One Tibetan monk, who I told the story to, said, "This was your mistake," which reassured me about his open-mindedness, though not my reaction to the event. Though years later, when I was less fearful, I tried to reproduce the experience, it never worked. Nowadays I've read articles that assert the whole Jesus story was a fabrication or an adaptation from earlier traditions, Irish, Egyptian or whatever. But I know that it was possible to have something called a vision, and that something answered my call. The question is, what or who was it? Why me? And why only one chance?
Good question.
And this person was born in Aberdeen, mother's a Scot, and the father was a civil servant and Freemason.
Okay, fine. I don't understand why the monk said that was your mistake. I laughed when Becky was reading out. I mean, what was your mistake? I don't understand that. What your mistake? Right, it's real. It's real. It's good. That is not somebody manipulating. That really happens. I'm led to understand that everyone is given one chance. Sometimes people are given more than one chance to have an experience which stands on its head the concept of the physical world, because everyone needs to be shown or given an opportunity that allows them to break free from the physical control that exists around us. And the question is whether your soul, your heart, your higher self is strong enough to recognize what has been given to it and to leave the control system of the physical world in terms of the way we interpret our lives and the lives of those around us. So I will tell you that what you've told me means that it doesn't matter whether Jesus landed in Cornwall and went to Southern Ireland, or whether he was here or there. It represents a good energy. And why you? Because you called out. You actually said, this is not new. Moses, all of the rest of them used to say, send me a sign. How many people listening to my show have or know of people who have said, if you're real, send me a sign? Because physical people require something that's in their face to make them counteract the everyday control system. And you had something given to you. Now, the fact that you suddenly thought, if there's a God, there's hell, that is the other side trying to counteract. And so you had the good energy answering your call, saying to you that the Spirit of Jesus exists in terms of what he stood for, the beliefs that he stood for. You can't fault the teachings. You might not like the way it's done, but the teachings, you can't fault them really, because they're good. And so what happens is that you get a nice blast of good energy, and so the bad guys then want to come in and they talk to you about hell, and yeah, if there's good, there's evil. And so you get the doubt going, you get a bit of fear, and so it goes. You don't need another crack at it. This is seared into your memory, and it's as true today as it was then. And it's how you interpret it, what lessons you take from it, and then how you apply that to your everyday life. So what it tells you is that there is a real world outside of the physical. I throw a ball up in the air, it comes down. We call that gravity. And I only believe what I can see, hear, and touch. Yet you were shown something that didn't exist in the physical world. So immediately you realize that the world of science, as the university taught, isn't actually accurate in all aspects. And what you do with it now is that you realize that you have been given a tremendous opportunity to break free, and the first thing you've got to do is to ditch your fear. Very important. You remove your concept of what fear is. Have no fear. In Jesus' teachings, he said, walk through the valley of death, I have no fear. Most people don't, again, understand the concept of it. What he's actually trying to teach you is that fear is the one thing that can prevent you from ascending to the fifth dimension. And some years ago, I showed a slide, a presentation of a door opening, and then a person being offered the opportunity to walk through that door, but couldn't bring themselves to walk through the door because of fear. So embrace what you were given. That's a very golden opportunity to have your thoughts and ideas answered, and what you do with it now is entirely up to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Kathy from Belgium says, "Hi Simon and Becky, I was just wondering, did President Trump use the China virus to disclose some long-existing but suppressed or hidden medical cures to the people? For example, does the drug Regeneron regenerate your body within 24 hours and make you feel like you're 20 years younger again? These are some statements from President Trump since he supposedly went to Walter Reed National Military Medical Center." So I'll read a list of a few statements.
Go on then.
"I went in and wasn't feeling too well. They gave me Regeneron. It was like unbelievable. I felt good immediately. We have Regeneron. We have made a similar drug from Eli Lilly, and they are coming out. If you look at some of the therapeutics, frankly, they're miracles coming down from God. They've called them therapeutics. I call them cures. It's much more important to me than a vaccine. Now I'm better, and maybe I'm immune. I feel better than I did 20 years ago. It's going to be much more than a therapeutic. You're going to get better fast, just like I did. Again, it was a blessing in disguise that I caught the virus. I learned a lot about COVID. I learned it by really going to school, the real school. The drug companies have made a lot of it. Our military is doing the distribution, logistics. It's going to be free for everyone. And Kathy asks, I would really love to hear your opinion. Thanks and lots of love from Belgium.
Okay, thanks, Kathy. First thing there you can pick up on is that he doesn't really like vaccinations at all, and he'd much rather distribute this drug rather than have a vaccination. We can definitely say that the military are involved, and he says they're in distribution. He can't publicly tell you what I'm telling you, which is they created the drugs. They actually created it. He talks about the drugs coming from God. That's as close as he can tell you that they are back engineered from something else. He can't tell you the truth. Well, he could tell us the truth because we wouldn't be frightened, but the vast majority of the human race would just call him mad, and he'd just destroy any chance of election. But I can tell you these drugs are back engineered. Right. Direct questions. First of all, hands up or answers on a postcard to anybody who saw some of the tweets President Trump put out recently in relation to the virus prior to the statement that Kathy's just correctly given us. Wait for the great onrush of people. One of the tweets, he actually said that somebody got in. Another tweet, he said somebody got into the White House. Now, I'm the only person, as far as I'm aware, on the alternative news to actually say what I'm about to say. Maybe other people have said it, I don't know. But I can tell you it was a deliberate attempt to infect him. I know there's a lot of people who don't believe in the virus and they think it's something else. And you know my opinion on it. I don't want to get into arguments on that at this stage of our development. But there was an attempt to introduce a pathogen, let's just call it that, shall we? Introduce a pathogen into the inner circle of the White House. That is why President Trump tweeted, somebody got in. All right. The drugs that he's been given almost take the body back certain number of hours or years. I haven't got the full details on it. So pre any condition, they're short-term lived. There isn't something you can take time and time again. They're very powerful, and they're incredibly dangerous if you take them in a large dose, and it has to be very strictly controlled. But in small doses, they have the effect of, if I can use the term, rebooting the system clear of a virus. So the way you would affect, what is Trump, 75 years old, is he 72? I can't remember. So he would feel as if he was in his 50s. Now that's a short-term thing, but what it would do is it gives the body time to recalibrate, and as the drug wears off, he's actually free of the virus. So he was actually being accurate. This is a remarkable drug which has come from the United States military, which reboots or recalibrates the body, and that's why you don't need weeks and weeks and weeks in hospital, because it can do that. Now, here's a second piece of evidence. I said that there would be questions that would come up and I could take them rather than just give you the full news at the beginning. I get upset when people just listen to the first 10 minutes and then turn it off. They just want the updates. So I've decided I will, push the updates through the whole show. It keeps people listening. Don't be surprised that the other side were aware and created this opportunity to infect the White House. That is why Amendment 25 was on the lips of Pelosi when she was saying, you watch on Monday, whatever it was. You watch on Monday, I'm going to be talking about Amendment 25. And for those non-Americans, Amendment 25 is a defense mechanism in there which says if the United States president is incapacitated for whatever reason, there are methods for the Congress or vice president to take over. What had happened is that this was all planned and dealt with, and so they were absolutely convinced that not only would they infect the president, but he would be absolutely out of it, right running through the election. That was the whole point. Take him out so that he couldn't fight the election. So they were behind it. And so when Pelosi stood at the board and talked about Amendment 25, it was so far developed, they were so convinced this was going to happen, and so convinced that Trump would be collapsing on his knees, that they were ready to roll out with 25. So not content with trying to impeach him, not content with trying to do the Russian fix, sniping bullets at the White House, poison on the First Lady's nail varnish, goodness knows how many other attempts. Here was the final attempt to dump the virus in the White House in some method or other. That is why Trump went to a military hospital. Most presidents do go to Walter Reed, but it's a military hospital, and he was given this drugs, which meant that within 5, 6, 7 days he'd actually back to nearly normal working. So he did go to hospital. He did have the virus. I know a lot of people think he didn't. Have a look at some of his talks. You'll see his face has changed. He's lost a bit of weight. His face has changed, and he's a little bit breathless. So you watch some of the talks he's had. Those are classic signs of someone who's had it but been treated very successfully for it. He'll be fine. He'll be totally fine because he's had the medication. These evil people will stop at nothing. I know in the alternative news it's like they don't want, they say that, you know, this, that and the other, but Trump had to be got out of the White House because if the bad guys were so intent on doing that, the good guys didn't really know what the next move was. If they're prepared to do that and they're prepared to have snipers, what else could they do? Best thing was to get him out and get him into Walter Reed, where he would be protected by the Marines, etc., etc. So it's a really good question. Thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. Ian, our North England coordinator, says, Hello Simon and Becky.
Hi.
I have a question from a member which I thought would be best answered if I forwarded to you,
okay,
as someone who will know, rather
Maybe.
than me pontificate about it.
Maybe. Who knows?
His question is, here's something that's got me thinking. If the likes of Hillary, Obama and a few others are already dead and have been replaced by clones, why didn't their consciousness jump into the clone when the body died?
Because I don't believe they are clones. I don't believe those characters are clones. I believe that there are clones available, or some form of advanced Project Bluebeam that from time to time can be wheeled out. But that doesn't mean that the existent body is done away with. You see, you can have a real person and 2 or 3 clones running about, and as long as they don't meet each other, as long as the cameras don't ever pick them up meeting each other, that's been going on for years. You know, in the old days, you know, the leaders of countries at war would have body doubles, and they would have, you know, one double in Naples and one double in Zurich and one double in London. So the bad guys were continually, you know, looking to see, well, the bad guys can do the same, can't they? They can put 2 or 3 clones in different places, and the good guys are trying to work out who's really who, and who are we negotiating with. We're sitting around a table, but who are we actually negotiating with? But this is only happening at very small amounts. The likes of Hillary and Obama are still there. You know, I'm sorry if people want to keep pushing the fact that they're dead and these are clones. No, they're not. They're not. Because there's no need to do that. There's no need to. The time to do that is if Hillary Clinton was arrested, tried in prison, and then had the death penalty. Well, what the bad guys would do is substitute her for a clone the day before the sentence was carried out. You see? So that's how they would work that. Even people in our movement haven't got their head around the real power that these guys have. I mean, you know, I look at some of the websites, official websites from the state, providing news and information, and anything coming out of President Trump's mouth is immediately fact-checked or questioned, or the word. President Trump bizarrely said this: President Trump oddly said this. President Trump strangely said this. And something that from Kamala Harris or the other guy is just taken as fact. So we can forget that the enemy isn't just sitting in a bank, isn't just sitting in some huge tall building. It's all around you. It's the organizations of the state and the private sector. Think about when the president said the industrial, military, political complex. That was right back in those days. What we've seen is the military actually removing itself from that. And now you've just got the industrial, political complex. And the banking, of course. But the military has sidestepped that. So the military is no longer in the same shape or form part of that cabal. And again, people in our truth movement haven't necessarily got their head around that. That we've seen a movement much more towards the civilian side. The satanic forces are far more embedded in the civilian side and the social networking side and the communication side than they are in the military side. So the military now is moved right away from it. And, we can be sure that if Kamala Harris becomes the next president of the United States, there'll be a whole sacking of generals right across the board as she removes any opposition to her from the United States military. And I make a prediction that cities in Arizona and Texas, which are boarding the wall, will be made into free cities, and they will bring the wall down or the fence down. So if the Democrats win, you should expect the wall or the fence to be dismantled. It will come down totally, no question of that, no matter how much money it costs. And cities like Phoenix or Houston, there will be a big move to make them free cities, to pay them back for being so pro-defense. So there'll be a payback. So the Democrats will actually be seeking to do that. And I don't think they'll do away with the Second Amendment. I don't believe that the Democrats would do that. But what I think they would do is take away the right of any American to hold any gun other than a handgun. I think that's what they'll do. They'll take away the United States' rights to hold anything more powerful than a handgun. And I know there'll be people who will say, Simon, you're not American, you can't make those statements. Well, I'll give you some evidence that in some states in America, California might be one of them, where a gun, let's say a Heckler & Koch or a Glock, take a Glock, can hold, say, 17 rounds. Well, some states you're only allowed to put 5 rounds in your gun. Those Americans will know what I'm talking about. So, in Democrat states, there's a real want to move to that. So don't be surprised if there's a payback, and those pro-Trump organizations or pro-Trump groups are going to be on the receiving end big time. And we shouldn't be surprised that they feel strong enough to do that, because they've got all of the arms of government. And that's why I repeatedly say I get incredibly cross when people say the war's nearly over. It's nearly over. The bad guys have nearly finished. It's just the final bit. We're there. How much more evidence do we want in our faces? You can't say anything about inoculations. You can't talk about 5G. You can't, in a negative way. You can't do anything like that. Your YouTube account is closed. You have no method of communicating with the public. Social media turns you down. The major news turn you down. And yet people are still telling me that, the war's nearly won. It's nearly over. This, that and that group this is nonsense. Absolute nonsense. And I tried in my last podcast to talk to you about how the bad guys were attempting to take over the new banking system with artificial intelligence, and people saying, no, but the AI is good AI. Yeah, but the people programming the AI might not be good. You know, if I've got a nail and I'm going to bang it into a piece of wood, I don't care whether that nail is good or bad. It is the person holding the hammer that actually counts. So, you know, the fight is on. It really is. And for years, I've said to anyone who'll listen to me, the end is good. But my goodness me, what a bumpy road we have towards it. And sometimes in our movement, we tend to think, oh, it'll be all right. And we just try and push it away. But the reality is we mustn't. We must understand what is happening and occurring. I want to show you this. It's just interesting. This is just a model. Again, I should have answers on a postcard. So it's a Houghton flying wing. And just to show how lies perpetuate. When that aircraft fell into the hands of the Americans, they did a lot of secret trials and tests. And they did not want to release the facts. And so they put it out to their people that this was the death knell of Germany. Germany was really down on its resources, so they had to build the airplane out of plywood. This aircraft was built largely out of plywood. And so the official line was Germany bankrupt, destroyed by bombing, trying to build this flying wing aircraft. So they built it out of plywood, and by the way, they were so poor that they used graphite dust, which is from pencil leads, graphite which they used in the wood. And I saw a YouTube video only 3 or 4 days ago on this aircraft regurgitating the same nonsense. You know, and this is the problem when you control the narrative. The winner always controls the narrative. This aircraft, the flying wing, was made of plywood so that it was less detectable by radar, and it had graphite in it because that actually absorbed radar waves. It was the world's first stealth aircraft, and the official figures that I've seen, I say official, I don't mean from the news corporations, show that had that aircraft reached production properly and was launched from France to do a bombing run on Britain, the British radars would have had something like 35% response time reduced. And the calculations that I've been shown was that they would barely have had enough time to scramble interceptors before this aircraft was over the south coast. So my point here is that if you control the narrative and you put lies out, then if you control the media, they run with that. And if there's not a voice counteracting it, then within just a few short years, that becomes gospel. It becomes the official line. And so we must be very, very careful when people tell us something, and we should ask ourselves, why are we being told that? Who does that benefit? You know, and when the mass media get on the back of it, we clearly are suspicious. You know. Okay, next question, please.
Okay, thank you. The next question is from Melissa from California and USA. Thank you for all that you are, Simon and Rebecca. My question is, since I was a child, I've been able to see small red dots pulsating at night. When I see them, it usually appears as one small red dot in the air, then shakes and pulsates into multiple tinier little red dots. Do you know what this is? Thank you.
Yes, it's not an entity, it is the fabric of the universe. Be a bit more clear for you. This is the construct of our reality. To create a web of reality, you have to have a net on which to hang it on. That's the most physical human words I can use to try to explain. What you're seeing is that which exists to hold the reality. But surprisingly, there are quite a few people that can see this. I can't. I can't see it, but I've met several people now who are capable of that. And sometimes it's at night because the amount of information that needs to be carried is greatly reduced. You know, if you're on a highway or a road, you've got traffic lights, you've got this, you've got that. And there's a massive amount of information that has to be carried. But at night time, in the quiet of your own room, the amount of information is massively reduced. And so these, let's just call them nexus points, they're not being activated. They don't need to carry the signal. And they go through a program of pulsation. So that's what you're seeing. It can't harm you. It is the fact that you can see something that most people can't, which means that you're incredibly psychic. And I would really want you to try to develop that. So thank you for sharing that with us. Great. Well done.
Okay, thank you. So Harry from England says, "Hiya Becky and Simon. Can we as humans ask for help from any of the alien races and receive it? If we can, how do I go about making contact for help? I am physically unwell and could do with some help from the higher races to get fixed and better. I am only 30.
Okay.
Many thanks, much love and appreciation to you guys and the whole of Connecting Consciousness." This is Harry.
That's one of the hardest questions that anyone can answer, simply because there's no book, there's no history, there's nothing. I can only tell you what I believe to be the truth, and that is that you are unlikely to receive what you're looking for in this lifetime for the conditions that you have, simply because some people would say that you agreed to have these conditions when you came here. I don't necessarily aspire to that. Intervention from outside tends to only come when it's a matter of life and death. If that individual is to play a part or a role which the loss of that individual would be so negative that overrides the point about being maintained or coming back. A number of people who've written books, truthful people who've written books about their experiences, and they had near-death experiences. We could accept that God brought them back, and in some cases I'm sure that's true, but in many cases it's literally other entities who perhaps come to them as an angel or come to them as something and say, "It's not your time yet." The number of times that has been used as a phrase tells us that there's a narrative going on here. It's not your time yet. And so this intervention we tend to only get at the moment of life and death if it is not yet our time. If we are in great pain or great sadness, that doesn't mean that our body is going to end. And so we are left alone with that. And I mean, it sounds pretty awful. How many mothers have gone to their priest and said, a bus knocked or a truck knocked my child down and killed my child. Why did God let that happen? Why doesn't God bring my child back? And this is the point, that when we are created, when this world is created, we have free will. And the entities that we can't see very easily only intervene when that free will has been so altered and affected through lies that any choice or decision we make is not based on a true judgment. And that's when they might come in and make an effect. Otherwise, we'd have 10 million flying saucers all over the planet. All the evil people would be arrested and we'd have a paradise. So why aren't we in that paradise? Why doesn't that happen? Because we have to come out of this ourselves. We have to make that effort. Yeah, sure, we could do with a bit of help. But, if a child, and those of you who've had toddlers, if a child falls down and you continually pick that child up, how do they learn to get up themselves? How do they learn to get up if everything is done for them? So I know that's going off a little bit, but what I'm saying to you is that you would be better off not calling for help, but to look into your soul, look at who you are, look at what you are, and attempt some healing with yourself and find healers around you to work with you. And it's not like Lourdes where you're going to walk into the water and walk out again and be healed overnight. Some people claim that, I'm sure, but most people have to work at it for a very long time. So rather than asking somebody else from another galaxy to come and assist you, see what you can do to help yourself, but try also to do within the either physical or mental limitations that are upon you, to do as much as you can, to be as much of the person that you can, because you're clearly capable. You've written to me, there's a good mind there. So that's where I think I would push my energy to self-healing, working with groups, and playing as much an important role as you can. Who knows, when we move into another dimension, which we will do, then all of the ails and physical disabilities of our body will drop away. I mean, that's the hope, isn't it? I can't say for sure, but I know that it is a lot better place than where we are at the moment. So that's my advice to what was a very difficult question, and must be a very difficult situation for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I was just thinking that myself as well, that, try and seek humanity from... Try and seek help from humanity, and try and look into your own soul and into why you may have certain conditions, and also look into healing therapies that you'd prefer. I mean, some people prefer homeopathy, some people prefer herbal, some people prefer looking into the whole diet, or Reiki healing or whatever. There's so many different modalities of trying to improve one's own health and seek healing. That it's more of your own personal spiritual journey.
Yes, there are some what I call very harsh people out there who basically say, well, if that's what you've got, there's something wrong with you. There are people like that say, oh, well, I never get ill, I don't get this, I don't get that, I'm such a high vibrational person that nothing ever gets me. Well, that's arrogance, actually, to the highest level. I've got no time for that. It is true, the higher you raise your vibration, the less likely you are to be attacked. But it's very wrong to project that I'm okay, therefore I must be good, and you're ill, therefore you must be bad, or you're failing, or you're not doing that. That is a very, very warped sense of the New Age. We are all attacked from time to time, all of us. And those attacks take on different shapes and different styles. But Becky's right, and I'm sort of following that line, which is we need to look into ourselves to build ourselves up. If a ship has got a hole in it and it's sinking, you've got to do two things. You've got to actually block up the hole, and you've got to pump out the water that's gone into the ship so the ship comes back up. So it's identifying what the problem is, what's causing that problem, and psychics and healers can help you do that. And then it's about looking inside your body, the ship, and say, how can we repair, what can we do that will work that? So that's a really good question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the last question of today,
Well,
I'm sure we've gone over the hour.
Oh, well, fine.
Is from Caroline, our Netherlands coordinator. And Caroline says, in Benjamin Fulford's latest report, he said that the Dutch royals and Mark Rutte, the Prime Minister, were assassinated because all of the crimes against humanity. I can hardly believe that they would be assassinated. Can this be true? If yes, then why assassinate and not bring them to justice with a lifelong sentence in prison? In brackets, and humiliate them publicly. If it's not true, then why would Ben Fulford bring this news? I think he mentioned he'd received the information from MI6 and the Russians. Love and gratitude, Caroline.
Well, you can't trust MI6 and the Russians if they have the same story. Russia at the moment is playing a very, very self-centered political game. There was a time 4 or 5 years ago, or 3 years ago even, when Russia was much closer. But Russia now is doing what China's doing. It's coming back on itself, and it's protecting its own borders, rightly or wrongly, and is taking out dissident speakers against it. And so if ever I got a message from MI5 which was exactly the same as a message from the FSB or any of the other groups, I would be very suspicious, because I wouldn't expect them to match. There's a great deal of of chatter on the internet about this person's dead, that person's dead, they've been replaced by a clone, they're this, they're that, and that's been going on for years now, and in perhaps 99% of the cases it's nonsense. As a good person, we should always, I'm talking about the body politic here, good as all of us on this show and everywhere, we should never do what the bad guys do. You know, we shouldn't fall into their trap. I don't approve of people being assassinated or taken out, because then we're only doing what the other side do. And you know, where's a boundary between us? You know, if the cabal kills somebody and then the white hats kill somebody, what really? If we believe in what we say, then we have to have a process. We have to have a transparent way of dealing with it. You know, I mean, there was so much chatter that the Queen was no longer the Queen. There was a new king, and I said, look, well, let's see who opens Parliament. You know, the Queen was dead. The Queen did go through about 4 years ago, 5 years ago, maybe a bit more. She went through a very rocky phase where she was, you know, medically not brilliant. But hey, there are plenty of drugs and there are plenty of things they can do to bring an ailing monarch back. And you know, the Queen is the Queen. It's not a clone. She is the Queen. And you know, stories of high-profile people being killed. You know, I don't personally go along with that. I have no evidence. You know, there's more and more stories of people being taken out, and you know, if we believed half of it, then all of the bad guys would be dead by now, and I could walk down to my local shop and I could talk about this, that, and the other, and everyone would be, yeah, that's right. But that's not the world we live in, is it? The control system is even more powerful. You know, we're looking at almost curfews in Great Britain. That's what's coming. We're looking at mask wearing even when perhaps you're out in the park exercising. You're looking at a reduction in your freedoms and your liberties across the planet. Is that really the world where the good guys are taking out the bad guys? Is that really what we're seeing? No, it's not. What we're seeing is a real emergence of power from the evil people, who, realizing quite rightly that they are under pressure, that they have lost ground, and I've said that and I've been on record of saying that they've lost ground, not so much because of people like President Trump, but because of people like you, people whose consciousness is rising, people who are asking questions, people who no longer believe the same mantra pushed out by the same government-backed organizations. To these bad people, you're the enemy. President Trump is an individual who causes them a problem, but they believe that they've worked him out, and they believe they've controlled him through the media. The problem is the advancement of consciousness, the advancement of the ability to transcend this low vibrational prison that we are in. We are the problem, because we are the ones seeking a better future and a better world, and we believe that's possible. And on that note, are hoping to push forward with the Healing Centre in Britain, have some meetings coming up, looking to work with some partners in England to make that a reality. You know, this COVID business makes it very difficult to get out and face-to-face meet, but I want you to know that that really is happening. And you know, when all partners are signed up and agreed, then I'm sure we'll do some sort of joint announcement, and Britain will be the first connecting consciousness healing centre, and it'll be a lot more than that, and that's really important. Talk to you about the court case with the BBC. That is ongoing. They have replied, and considering our reply back to them, that's very much ongoing. Nothing's changed. Unfortunately, in law, we can't be open. I'd love to be much more open with you. I really would, and the time will come when I can, and tell you of the rather horrible things that they are saying about me. You'll laugh, but yeah, they're quite nasty and quite hurtful, And there will come a time when I can actually go public and tell you exactly what they've said in writing, and that'll be interesting. But at the moment we can't, because of the way the law works. And there are other aspects that we're looking at regarding certain people. That's also wheels of justice turn slowly. So I don't want to end on a down note, because I've always believed in a positive ending. But unlike the sort of fluffy clouds and candle brigade, I actually think that the road towards this wonderful world, this wonderful opening, is full of potholes and great cracks across it and great obstacles. And does the motor car that we're all in conk out, and we all have to get out? And do we walk? And if 100 of us get out of the car, how many will be at the end? Will only 5 of us be at the end? What is a victory? Is a victory 1, 20, 30, 40? So maybe we need to understand that while some people are telling you that all the bad guys have been taken out, that isn't actually having any material effect on your day-to-day life. And that's what we need to focus on. How is my life being improved by this so-called at the highest level being done here, there and everywhere? How is that actually affecting me? Stories for the last few years going around, and they've resurfaced, that when this financial reset occurs, every man, woman and child will get $1,000, $5,000, $10,000. That's nonsense. That is just nonsense. That is not what's going to happen, and this is very unfair for people to go around and raise up people's expectations. What will happen if this so-called reset, and it's not the word I use anymore, if it goes through and is not hijacked by the bad guys, what will happen is that projects or groups will be funded. Individuals won't be funded. They won't give money to individuals. They'll give it to projects that take forward the best course for humanity. Because if you gave everyone 1,000, 5,000, 10,000, how does that improve the world we live in? Everyone goes out and buys drink, chocolate, drugs, a new motor car, a new television, a new cell phone on Monday. How is the world any better the following Monday? The world will be better if projects are funded that are signed up to a spiritual agreement and understanding, and do not have their systems controlled by the very same people from the days of Babylon pulling their strings. So there's so much disinformation, and it's cruel to give false hope to people. I have never done that. I have always tried to give people the most accurate truth. And I know it's very sensational. It's great to say that this group have done this and that group's done that and these people have been killed and that, because that sounds great. It grabs the headlines, and yeah, I could do that. I could do it every time we have a podcast, and anybody who put my podcast together would say, blimey, there's all these bad guys been taken out. There can't be any bad guys left. That's not the narrative. That's not the reality. That's not the world we're in. We're in a world that's not about how many bad guys have been killed. We're in a world of how many ordinary human beings are refusing to accept the narrative and are developing spiritually, energetically, and are moving out of the control system of this network. That's all that matters. Because if you raise your vibrational energy, then this evil intent has less and less hold on you. So from connecting consciousness point of view, I don't push that side of it, that bad guys are being killed left, right and centre, and that it's going to be all right tomorrow. Because when tomorrow comes and it's not all right, I've then got to tell you again that, don't worry, X and Y have been taken out. It's going to be all right next week. And next week arrives. And, oh, yeah, but don't worry, because that's just nonsense. But neither am I one of these people that say that humanity is finished. There are a number of commentators that say it's already too late, that humanity has finished. So I don't hold to that. I do hold that humanity will be successful, but I don't know what percentage actually makes it through. But I do know that if you stay truth and love and you believe in yourself, then you stand the best chance of outwitting this very, very stupid, self-replicating, service to self satanic energy. And that's why I created Connecting Consciousness, because it was an organization not about making money, not about building a cult. It was about building a worldwide organization where people developed and flourished, and frankly, yes, they challenged the status quo. They challenged the way they were being treated. They challenged the rules they're having to live under. They challenged the very ideology. And, it's the only game in town. Well, I want to work against that. Absolutely, I do. And that's what I believe in. And, with 10 years, we're celebrating 10 years, not necessarily in this format, but we're celebrating 10 years of working directly to the people, not through any mouthpiece. And that is what the future must be, working with good intent and not with organizations that want to steal that intent and take it away. Remember this on my closing words, that satanic energy can't create, it can only replicate. That's why the reptilians are fantastic at copying and replicating, but they don't have the spark of humanity to create. Okay, humanity has this God-given, and I'm using the word absolutely, God-given right to create. So we call that God creators. I'm not sure I use that word, but we can create. Lower density individuals just copy, or steal, copy, kill, take. Whereas those of us who, and there's, thank goodness there's lots and lots of us who are not into that, we are trying to create something for the benefit of humanity. And some people write music, some people write books, some people paint pictures, because they want to share that with people. That's service to others. Don't think that a painter, he or she who paints a picture, is service to self. They want to share that picture. Yeah, they should sell it. Of course they should sell it. Why shouldn't they? They're having their energy and their work recognized in a method that at this time on this planet is the exchange method. 100 years time might be something different. But what I'm saying is that when we're service to others, we can do so many things to escape the control that is around us. So don't be downhearted. That's really important. Yes, it's tough, but we will get there. But how many people will fall by the wayside because they didn't believe in themselves? Okay, it's like the guy on the film in the 1950s who's walking in the desert and he's got about that much left of water, and the films are so funny, aren't they? Because he staggers 20 paces and he takes a swig of water, and he staggers 20 paces. He'd be much better off downing it all and making his distance, because there's no evaporation from the bottle, and gets over the hill and there's a town. But if he'd given up and fallen down, he would never have known that just over that hill was the salvation, was the finish, the end, his survival. And so that's the point, that what I'm asking everyone to do is don't give in to those people around you who's saying it's all over, we're all finished. Throw that off. Concentrate and believe, because we will get there. All right, thanks very much indeed. Lots of love to everybody.